Well, hello all. Today I want to talk about what Christianity is not, but it is often confused for. It is often confused for freedom, nationalism, liberty, allegiance to the flag, unity, etc. It's not best grammar, I would imagine, and I must say it sounds like a subject that I wouldn't be interested in. But what was funny for me was I was speaking to my spiritual mentor in the evening and he was going on about Christianity is not these various things that I've just mentioned there. And I like to set my alarm to listen to the Gators. And what was the Gators? It's a religious group and they sing songs. And what was it about? All about these things: freedom and liberty and allegiance to the flag and God bless America and, America the beautiful, and sort of the nationalism and the things that people conflate with Christianity. You know, it may even sound totally unimportant. What are you talking about this for? But I think it is. It's not something I've thought about much, but actually, now that he mentioned it, people do very often confuse Christianity with, say, nationalism or freedom, or even I could add democracy. Is Christianity involved with democracy? Not at all. Is it involved with liberty and freedom? Not at all. Is it involved with tight family bonding and unity of people? No. Christ came to bring division and a sword to the families very often. Christ often didn't get on with his own family. And his brothers didn't, they kind of weren't believers and didn't believe him and kind of mocked him. Didn't get on with his sisters who lived in Capernaum. He never visited them in his ministry. Two sisters at least who lived in Capernaum where he lived. There's no mention of him visiting them. And, we talk about patriotism to the red, white, and blue, or the flag, or pledges of allegiance. Since when did Christ ever show any patriotism towards the country, his country? What country would Christ have shown allegiance to? And the rulers of the country were the ones who put him to death for no reason. And would he have been allegiance to the Roman Empire? No. Was he in allegiance to the Israel state? No. There wasn't a state. They were kind of under Roman rule then. And isn't that also if you take it, a very Old Testament thing? God is not working with states. He's working with people from around the world. God is in fact shown no particular love for Israel, the country. If there was one country that you would say, oh, surely that's God's country, he loves Israel. Look at the history of Israel to see how much God loves it. Just look how much dwang it's always in. Does that seem to indicate, the Israelites were always going into captivity, and the nation was always disappearing and coming back and disappearing into Babylonian, Assyrian captivity, Roman captivity. They were very seldom a proper nation. So, if they had to have a flag, when Israel did fight the Romans, it ended up in Masada and suicide of those people. So you could say, I'm getting very annoyed with you for saying that it's not about nationalism. Well, often nationalism ends up fighting Christianity. Since when did Christ tell us to take up arms to fight for our country? We are citizens of another heavenly country. And that is a completely different thing to being patriots for our earthly country. In fact, we are loosely tied to this world. I remember being in almost perpetual conflict with South Africa, my country, because in my day, all the youth after you left school were forced into the army, and you had to fight for the country. And at the time we were fighting the Cubans and Angolans because there was this hot war against communism. And I didn't see any reason that I would have to go and fight for the country. I didn't care less. I thought all fighting and all war is pointless, and I didn't see that. I could not envision Christ in khaki. Christ would not have gone to war to fight for his country. There's just not a slightest chance that I foresaw that. So what did I do? I refused to carry arms. I refused to work on the Sabbath day. I got court-martialed when they called me up to go to war on the Sabbath day. What they did was they then, I got exempted. Well, in the court martial they found me innocent, but then they just called me up on a non-Sabbath day to go and fight in Angola. And I'd by that stage refused to carry a rifle. What do you do with a soldier who refuses to carry a rifle? Anyway, they sent me up to Angola, to the front line, to the border there, where there was a war going on, and I was in the kitchen cooking for the army. I felt if you can feed your enemies and love your enemies, you can feed your friends and your country. But I felt no nationalism, no allegiance to the South African nation or the South African flag or the South African cause. And eventually what we were fighting for was just given away, and Namibia, or Southwest Africa, just became Namibia. It was given away, it gained its freedom, and the Cold War ended. And as I say, people confuse. They think a good Christian is good nationalist. No, I belong to, and I'm an ambassador for a heavenly nation. That is my allegiance. I have no allegiance to this world, its nations, and its causes. Let's put it that way. The national goals are not my goals. Mine is a supernatural, national, eternal God's kingdom. That's my nation. So we are pilgrims in this world. We are lightly attached. Our ropes are not, and tent pegs are not deeply embedded in this world. Then let's take liberty and freedom. Since when is Christianity freedom? What do you mean by freedom? Which freedoms? Are we talking about American liberties and freedoms? Or what exactly? It sounds like a lovely concept. Or democracy. Freedom to choose our own leaders. Our own leaders in this world are rubbish. And yes, we go and vote for them. We choose the best of the worst. We say he's the least worst person. I guess I could vote for him. But even so, I mean, there's no such thing in the Christian concept of liberty. We are Christ's slaves. We are giving up our freedom. If you think that Christians are the people who can do the most, they have the most freedom to do anything, you're wrong. We have no freedom to sin. We have no freedom to do exactly what we want to do. We are constrained people. We are people who are constrained by laws and by convictions and by our love for God. And there are over 1,050 commands in the New Testament, 613 in the Old Testament. We are constrained by many of those. We of all people have the least freedom. We have no freedom to commit adultery. I did not feel a freedom to go and kill strangers whom the army just gave me a gun and said, go and kill these people that I had no beef with. I had no beef with the Angolans trying to defend their country against us, or the Namibians, and so on. So we have no freedom to commit adultery or to covet other people's things or to lie. We don't even have the freedom to lie. Christians are constrained. When we come to court, we have to tell the truth. And you know, when I hear people pledging allegiance to the flag, we are told by Christ, swear not at all. Don't swear. Don't vow. Don't pledge. Pledging allegiance is almost like vowing, like your allegiance to the flag, no matter what the country or the stupid leader at the time says. And I mean, you just hear the marching band, you hear nothing unites let's just say Americans and many other countries more than a good war. Let's go and kick butt in some Middle Eastern country, you know. No, that is not a Christian's job. And you know, like, celebrate the army. I mean, how often have American wars just been pointless? And they go to Iraq and just leave it a mess. They go, all the countries, Vietnam, all these places that, that was so unnecessary to go into, and then you just leave it a mess. And is this done in the name of nationalism or freedom or democracy? There is no there is no democracy in the Bible. Christ is a king. God is a king. He's a king with a kingdom. And he didn't say to the ancient state of Israel, okay, well, you all get together and choose nice and democratically and have freedom to choose. Democracy was a Greek concept. And democracy doesn't work. And the way God is going to rule is as a king. We are his slaves. There's no liberty in slavery. We are his doulos, or his, in the Greek, that means a slave. We his bond servants. So we give up our freedom to become Christians. And our freedom, we now become, in all aspects of our life, governed by higher laws, more heavenly laws. We have less freedom than virtually any other citizen in this world. We have no freedom to become mass murderers or covetous people or like the normal people who just go after everything worldly. The things in this world have very little interest for a Christian. So even concepts like democracy, if you think that by fighting for democracy in some foreign country, you're fulfilling God's will, that's absolutely not true. Democracy is not even on God's radar. Nowhere in the Bible is democracy advocated. So if anything, we're going to be a nation of kings and priests. Christ is going to rule as a king. He's not going to be a tyrant, but we're going to all know who's boss, and we're going to know that God is the one who sets authority. And Christ is calling lieutenants to be under him, to govern the nations, the cities. Be thou ruler over 10 cities. The cities are not going to have a choice. They're going to have no freedom. Christ is going to tell them what to do. And he's going to rule with a rod of iron. Does that sound like democracy? And if they don't like it, they can't vote him out and choose another king. So eventually the whole world will be under Christ. Does that sound like democracy? And they will have no ability to choose otherwise. So before we get all excited about democracy and freedom and liberty, let's think it through. Let's think through, are these truly biblical, even New Testament values? And let's have a look. Unity. I mean, Christ said, I came to bring a sword. And very often people were set at one against the other. Family members, he said, I've come to set one family member against another. Doesn't sound very harmonious, does it? But Christ wasn't even at harmony with his family members very often. He wasn't like big family orientated. He was kingdom orientated. Often his family, like I'm thinking of an instance where his family was standing outside the house, which was filled with people that he was preaching to. It might have even been the family home, the people that couldn't get into their own family home, and they called for Christ to come and do something about it. And he pointed to the people he was preaching to. He said, these are my family. I mean, that's a bit of a slight on his mother and all his brothers and sisters standing outside trying to get into their own home. But that is so. And very often, like, they would want to go to the feast, and Christ said, well, go, I'll come up later. He wasn't like heavily into unity at all costs. Because if unity involves compromise of religious values, there's no point in unity. So unity is not high on God's agenda. God doesn't want unity if it involves breaking his law or sacrificing his principles. He'd rather have a person who stands on their principles. I don't see that like John the Baptist was bringing much unity. He was telling the people off. He was telling them what they have to do. He wasn't trying to, let's all cozy up together. So it's very often that people confuse these things for Christianity, and they cannot be conflated. So you can't think that a person with a flag and a gun and, he's kind of a military person, and he's a fundamentalist, and this and that, is it necessarily a Christian? We just associate these things. We don't think about them. That what actually is Christianity? It's being a servant of the King, Christ. That is the priority. Now, what then we need to go and look at what did Christ do? No, Christ wasn't in khaki serving the army. Christ wasn't trying to promote democracy. Christ did not teach freedom or liberty. He didn't say to all the new Christians, release your slaves. He just said, become a better slave master, and you slaves become a better slave. He didn't. If God had wanted to in ancient Israel, he could have said, I ban slavery, but he didn't ban. He gave rules regarding slavery. And that was God in the Old Testament. So all these forms of human government, God has got nothing to do with them. He works around and with whatever form of government, whatever form of slavery, whatever form of whatever you're working with. Now, of course, as Paul said, if you have a chance to escape slavery, do it. But we don't have, in theory, I don't doubt that anyone who's going to watch this video is a slave, unless they're a slave to drugs or something like that. And I mean, then by all means, Christ came to set us free of bondage to Satan and his will, or to drug addiction, or to break down strongholds. That's the kind of freedom and liberty that Christ taught. But it wasn't like a political freedom. So, there we go. That is my little take on what Christianity is not.